Howdy, how's it going? Welcome back to the channel. So I'm going to let you in on a little secret. So with this whole building a car from scratch thing, there was a separate thing that I was going to try and exploit with it, which probably would have caused a bit of controversy. But me being me, that's fine. It's normal. But fortunately, with that project coming to a halt, finances, as everybody will know what's going on in the country at the moment, means that stuff like that is not going to happen anytime soon or ever again. So for me anyway, so part of the project, I had to firstly look at the regulations, right? Because I had to build a car. So the first thing I do is I look at the regulations, and something sort of came out screaming at me, right? And it dawned on me that maybe, and it's a suggestion, right? I'm not a lawyer. I think this would have to go through the sort of MSA courts or Motorsport UK courts. But it sort of dawned on me that torsion bars might not be legal in Motorsport UK racing, right? And everybody runs them, right? Bar a few people that don't. And I'm going to explain why I think that may be the case. Now, what I was going to do is race my car in a Motorsport UK event and potentially protest everybody, which would have pissed off a lot of people. But the regulations are the regulations, right? I've written regulations, and I know loopholes exist, and they are there to be exploited. That's part of the game, right? And I think a lot of people don't realise that with Motorsport UK karting, anybody can build a chassis, and the whole point of it is to build a better chassis than your rivals. So if they don't see the loopholes and you do, tough on them, right? They haven't been looking at the regulations and been competing in the right manner, right? Because that's what racing is. So let me explain why I think torsion bars, in my view, might contravene the regulations set out, called the technical regulations in the Motorsport Yearbook for kart chassis. Now, if you race Rotax or X30 and you look at the regulations, you'll see that it says any chassis that adheres to Motorsport UK regulations is legal. Okay, so you can build your own chassis as long as it's matches all the regulations, you know, and the main thing really is safety, as long as it's manufactured in a safe manner. So what regulations am I specifically talking about? Well, it's specifically, firstly, it's 16.1.3 that says you have to use magnetic steel, which is fine. And then, and 16.3 says the chassis must be constructed from magnetic steel. 16.3.2 says it must be of one piece construction, either welded or brazed. Very important. And then 16.3.3 says any form of chassis frame control which includes pivots, dampers or similar devices is prohibited. So that sort of just leaped out at me because I'm familiar with karts. Like if you look at Tony Kart Extreme, right, from the 90s, you'll see where you would normally have a torsion bar. It's just a straight bar that's welded, I think it's to the yokes, and then the bars are welded, the sort of side rails are welded to that cross bar, and then the front bar around the front. And on later Tony Karts, as you'll see, like on the one behind me, it's now been replaced by a torsion bar that you can replace and remove. So the question is, if I took a Tony Kart Extreme, right, and I cut that bar, right, the cross rail bar, right, and if I cut that and I removed it and chucked it in a bin, I've still got a one-piece constructed chassis. If I was to say, well, wait a second, if I keep that bar and then clamp it in and I can remove it, essentially that's a two-piece construction chassis, because I've got two pieces of tubing, and they're not welded. It's not welded or brazed to the chassis. It's clamped to the chassis. So the chassis frame must be constructed from 16.3.2. It must be of one piece construction, either welded or brazed. And this bar that I now have, I'm clamping it in. It's not welded. It's not brazed. So how can the chassis be of one piece construction if a chassis tube is clamped in? So that's the thing. So if you may argue, then we'll say the torsion bar is no longer part of the chassis. Then what is it? It's a torsion bar. What does a torsion bar do? It regulates the stiffness of the car. So that means any form of chassis frame control, which includes pivots, dampers, or similar devices. And I'd say that, in effect, it's changing the structural stiffness of the car and thus is a similar device. Then it's chassis frame control, because that's what a torsion bar does. It regulates the amount of torsion in the front of the chassis. So you could argue that, okay, you remove it and it's no longer part of the chassis. I would argue that it is, because quite demonstrably, if I decide to cut a piece of chassis off and then clamp it together, wherever I do it, it's going to be illegal. The reason that no one's really thought of it is because it's not in a structural part of the chassis that's integral to the structural integrity of the car. Like, you wouldn't clamp together the yoke to the chassis. Like, you wouldn't use a clamp. You would have to weld it, because a scrutiny would fail you, right? So, yes, as you can see, in my view, that it's a torsion bar is a secondary chassis component, thus has to be welded. And if you're saying it isn't part of the chassis, then it's chassis frame control, and thus is illegal as well. So now what you'll do at this point, you go, well, TKM's interesting, because they say you have to weld the front bar in. So TKM has a specific regulation that you're not allowed torsion bars. I don't think the regulations allow torsion bars for any car that's raced in the classes that say you must run MSA regulation chassis. So it's one of those weird things where I think maybe I'm wrong, and if you think I'm wrong, please, from a legal standpoint, tell me how I would be wrong in the judicial system of kart regulations. Because if TKM's regulation explicitly prohibit it, then that's an acknowledgement of something. It's been considered somewhere. I just think all TKM does, which is in their regulations, is you have to be. So it just basically says chassis to MSA UK, Motorsport UK regulations, technical regulations, and you have to weld the torsion bar in. But that, I believe, is the case anyway, because I just don't think in the regulations it says anything about allowing to cut up a piece of chassis and clamp it in. It has to be welded or brazed. A clamp isn't a weld, isn't a braze. So I think the regulations, if you're looking at them from my perspective, torsion bars may well be illegal. I would put forward maybe, I don't know. And everybody racing who's running a torsion bar would be technically outside of the technical regulations. Am I wrong? I don't know. It's just something I'd like to put out there. It's one of these weird sort of fringe things that no one really cares about. But I'm only telling you this because it was the kart build project has had to come to a stop, and part of my thing was, I was looking at chassis design, and I'm like, wait a second, I can't put a torsion bar in because it's illegal. But everybody runs torsion bars, right? So yeah, again, if you've got a comment, please leave a comment below. I would love to hear what your thoughts are. If anybody knows his experience with this kind of thing, please let me know. Yeah, and it's such a shame because I'd love to have built my own kart, but yeah, we all know why. We all know what's going on at the moment. So yeah, so with these videos, remember to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, which is, oh god, I hate saying those words because every YouTube video says them, but it really does help the channel, and it helps the views, helps the algorithm and everything. So yes, thank you for watching, and like I said, if you think I'm wrong, please tell me, because I want to know why I'm wrong from a regulatory standpoint, and please reference the regulations. Don't go, oh, it must be legal because everybody does it, because that doesn't fly. Unless there's a legal precedent where if everybody's outside of the technical regulations, that means some weird caveat. So, yeah, fantastic. Let me know. And, yeah, thanks for watching. And, I hope we all get better in the new year with regard to racing, because I know racing's been cancelled this month. So there you go.